Hey everyone, welcome. It's Naomi Wolf. I'm CEO and co-founder of Daily Cloud. Greetings, we love you all. I'm already getting nice messages, and I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce an incredibly important special guest tonight, James Ostrowski, and I'm also thrilled to hand it over to my wonderful CRO at Daily Cloud, Klein, highly accomplished entrepreneur, and a huge addition to our community. And he will introduce Mr. Ostrowski, but basically we're here to, via Mr. Ostrowski, empower you to sue your governor, school board, board of health, all the people who are harming your liberties. And we're sure that this is an incredibly impactful way to stem the tide of tyranny. Mr. Ostrowski has been incredibly effective in upstate New York, showing us all how to do this. So, and this whole event was, produced, delivered, maintained, supported by Craig Klein. So over to Craig Klein to welcome you and introduce Mr. Ostrowski.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wolf, and thanks everybody for joining us. We'll kind of go over some logistical rules of the road here once we get started, but first and foremost, let's introduce James Ostrowski. Thank you very much for doing this for us, Mr. Ostrowski. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to let you just tell the audience a little bit about your background and your experience in this area.
Well, thanks a lot. I'll try to be brief. A lawyer for 38 years. My father was a state judge, so I kind of grew up in the system. I know where all the bodies are buried. I know how the system works and doesn't work. Public interest lawyer. I've done criminal and civil trials and appeals in state and federal court. Not too many lawyers do that anymore. So I'm kind of a dying breed. But gives me sort of an insight as to how the system works, and hopefully convey that to you today. So that's pretty much. I went to Brooklyn Law School from Buffalo, worked down there for a few years, and I think that's about enough.
That's fantastic. Oh, just jumping in to say we're getting greetings from all over the country. We're very excited. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, people from San Diego, LA, New York, all over the place.
Wow.
A lot of interest in this topic for sure. And just so everybody knows, obviously a lot of people have already figured it out, but you can go to the chat that should be on the right of your screen, and you can type in messages there, and we'll be keeping an eye on those and try to make sure that we get your questions to Mr. Ostrowski. And also in that same little window, there's a tab that says handouts. Mr. Ostrowski was nice enough to put together a sample complaint that he'll be talking about in a little bit. And in that handouts tab, you'll be able to download that and a few other things that he's put together for you. So just want to make sure everybody knows how to do that. So that being said, Mr. Ostrowski, what we'll try to cover today is just, sort of what you've done in New York State so far with regards to your efforts against the school boards, the legal strategies that you're employing and that you've seen work, and then talk about the complaint template that you put together. And then again, everybody towards the end, we'll try to make sure we have plenty of time for your questions and just get into them as deeply as we can. So with that said,
thanks a lot.
I'll turn it over to you.
A lot of ground to cover. It's going to be kind of a crash course. So I don't usually talk fast, but I can talk fast if I have to. So there's 4 lawsuits going on now, and I want to give the other lawyers credit. There's a lawsuit in Albany that preceded ours. It's in federal court over the same issues, and that was filed, by Thomas Marcel, John Sweeney, and Adam G. and Greco. And they graciously allowed us to use a lot of their papers, and we're poaching their expert witnesses too. I've signed up 3 out of the 5 working on that to get our motion in Buffalo federal court. We want to get a motion for an injunction filed as soon as possible. There's also a couple state cases, brand new one I don't know much about in Westchester, but the more lawsuits, the merrier. The lawsuit that had a preliminary injury was filed by Chad LaVeglia. That's now on appeal in the Second Department in Brooklyn. So 4 cases ongoing. There's no competition. It's like the more cases you file, different lawyers have different ideas. There's a bit of a judge shopping thing going on where the more judges you try, the more likely you are to get a judge who's going to agree with your point of view. And we're both state and federal courts, so we'll get the best benefits of either system. So I want to give everybody a crash course. I'm going to go through it fast, but my outline will be made available by Craig and Dr. Wolf after. So don't worry about really taking a lot of notes. Yes.
Sorry to jump in, but before you go to the basic part of the complaint, can you just share what it is that you've done? Like what it is that you've done to date with, what is the what before you go on?
Yeah. So
How?
a couple weeks ago, some of the parents of students said that they want to contest the mask mandate. I should have brought that up. They want to contest the mask mandate for K through 12 schools, mostly public schools, but actually it would affect private schools to a large extent too. So with the help of the lawyers in Albany, I was able to file a very short period of time. Normally it takes a couple of months, but we got it down to about 2 weeks. So we're challenging the mandate for New York K through 12 students. There's a statewide mandate. Since I'm in Buffalo, I had to also include the Erie County Executive because it's a local mandate. And we sued 14 school districts on behalf of 24 families. So the other day, I personally drove and served all 14 of them, which turned out to be an effective strategy because it got done fast. And I actually met some of the superintendents, and unofficially, I could say some of them have no use for this mask mandate. So hopefully, we might be able to split off some of them and just focus on maybe the statewide mandate, which will probably be the last to fall. So that's basically what the lawsuit's about.
Thank you.
There's a template which I sort of stripped out all the specific things that don't really relate to other families, but kept in all the generic stuff. And there's fill in the blanks so that if you want to file a pro se lawsuit, you can fill in the blanks and do that. But if you can locate a public interest attorney or maybe a large firm that might do it pro bono, they'll have a head start because they'll have all the work done by basically two different law firms with a lot of experience in this area. So let me just go ahead. I found a disclaimer by the ABA, so let me just say that this doesn't constitute legal advice. There's no attorney-client relationship. And check everything I say out with the attorney of your choice before proceeding. So this is filed under a statute. Normally don't like to get into jargon, but it's a very common statute. Everybody in the profession knows it's 42 U.S.C. 1983. Allows you to go to state or federal court, we're in federal court, to sue state officials who violate your federal constitutional rights. And that's exactly the statute that we're relying on in the 2 federal cases. So the defendant has to be a state government official. I mentioned private schools. You can't sue a private school principal. Why? Because there's no state action. They're not bound by the Constitution. For trivial pursuit purposes, the only thing in the Constitution that's really binding on private parties is the anti-slavery amendment. So that doesn't apply here. So you have to allege, and we do in the complaint, that they acted under color of state law. So you can file a action, a lawsuit. We call it an action for jargon purposes to confuse people and make them hire lawyers. But so you can ask for money damages, which we are. You can ask for an injunction, which is a court order to stop. That's our main goal here. And you can ask for a declaration of legalities. And hopefully, even though we're only suing on behalf of 24 families, if we get a declaration, it should be binding on the defendants for all purposes. So that's really important to know. We're kind of fighting for everybody. Not to say other people can't and shouldn't file their own cases, but even if they don't, we're hoping to get some relief for everybody. So you can go to state or federal court. I prefer federal court. Why? Because it's the state officials you're suing usually are the same people who appoint the judges. So
we're having a little trouble with the audio. Excuse me for interrupting.
Sure.
Yeah, you're cutting out a little bit on us.
Yeah, you're coming in and out. People are saying they don't hear you. Is there a way to move closer to?
Yeah, I can certainly do that. Does that help?
That does sound better. That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that does sound better. Yeah, thank you. Please keep going.
Yeah, I apologize for that.
No problem.
We choose federal court because, you know, half the judges in federal court are appointed by one party, half are appointed by the other. And this particular issue might get more sympathy from the one party. So that's why we go to federal court. The judges are more familiar with these causes of action, and the state court judges often are not. They don't know what to do with these things. So that's why we go to federal court. You will file in your local district, and you can sort of find that by Googling it. Like I'm in Buffalo, which is the Western District. It goes from Buffalo to Rochester down to Elmira. And then the Southern District is Manhattan and the Bronx. The Eastern District is Long Island. This is true in every state. You'll be filing in your district because that's where the action that you're complaining about has occurred. So you start the lawsuit by filing a complaint. It's a term of art. It's not just a gripe, it's what you file. And that's what we have, the template that will be made available to you. And I forgot on my outline, there's also a thing called a civil cover sheet. Now, also not on the outline, there's a pro se law clerk in every federal court, and that person will become your best friend. They're good people, they're attorneys, they know the system, and they're just sitting there waiting for you to call and ask them a question. So you can go on the website, get that civil cover sheet. It's going to be a little confusing. Not worth me telling you how to do it. Just call the pro se clerk and have them help you filling it out. Everything is e-filing now. You may have to give your paper copy to the clerk, but you want to get on the e-filing system, and it's also called PACER, so you can check the docket and other cases that are similar and print out those cases. And you want to file as soon as possible because there's deadlines. Now in New York State, it's 3 years, which is a fairly long time for something like this, which is kind of an emergency thing happening now. But you do want to get to court as soon as you can. Every state has a different deadline, though. In some states, I think it's as short as a year. I don't think there's any deadline shorter than a year, but I can't vouch for each state. The Supreme Court says each state sets its own deadline, even though it's a federal case. Kind of confusing, but that's the way it is. So in federal court, once you file, you have to serve the defendants. You have 90 days to do it. So don't let the grass grow under your feet. Now, there's several parts to the complaint. And again, you'll have the template. I'll go through the basic parts very quickly. You want to make a jury demand. No offense to judges, but juries usually have a different point of view and often believe that the injury is worth more money than a judge would say. So the jury demand is built into the complaint. You have to allege jurisdiction. Kind of complicated, but if you look at the complaint, you'll see the sort of jargon that you have to use. Federal court has jurisdiction because you're alleging a claim under 42 U.S.C. 1983. So then you want to describe the parties. Who are the plaintiffs? And who are the plaintiff is the family and suing on behalf of the student. There could be a number of families on each case. If it's pro se, though, unlike the lawyer signing for the complaint, if you're pro se, every pro se plaintiff has to sign the complaint. Otherwise, the court will reject it.
Yes. Mr. Ostrowski, can you define what you mean by pro se?
Yeah, sorry. Pro se means representing yourself. It's Latin. It means
okay.
Representing yourself. And
great.
You have an absolute right to do that, and although it's not the ideal thing to do, because unfortunately the legal profession has been largely AWOL on the lockdown, you may have to file the complaint yourself. Now, I mentioned, I might as well mention it now. If you succeed in the early stages, it's more likely you can pick up an attorney later. I'll mention that later when we talk about the trials. So then after that, you have the basic facts of the complaint. And again, the template will sort of show you how this is done. In this case, you're going to allege that, there's an order mandating masks, and you want to be as specific as possible, as I was. And then how it's affected the students, either specifically, maybe a particular person has a rash, or maybe somebody's getting bullied because the mask slips down. These things have happened, I think, in the complaint that we filed. And then the general things that are really drawn from the expert witnesses that the good lawyers in Albany provided for everybody, and who are going to be part of our case as well. It's very detailed. It talks about the harm that the masks do. It talks about how the masks do not stop COVID, and it's very detailed, so you won't have to do a lot of reinventing of the wheel. If you do a pro se complaint, the courts sort of will give you some breaks on making errors. They won't hold you to the standard that they would hold me to. So that's actually good news. And then after you state the facts, you got to understand this jargon. Cause of action, that's your legal theory. In other words, what constitutional provision has been violated. Now, in the complaint that I drafted, I added a few theories that were not in the original complaint that I looked at, but they emphasize freedom of speech, and I think that is a good cause of action, because it does, particularly for young people who communicate more on a nonverbal basis than even adults do. It's interfering with their freedom of speech, their freedom of association. And so that's our number one theory. I also believe it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment, because the Fourth Amendment protects your bodily integrity, and having somebody slap a mask on you is kind of like a partial seizure of your body. So I believe that's important to allege. The Fifth Amendment due process, people have written, I don't know, many volumes on due process. It just means fair treatment, basically. And this is not fair. And so that's another ground. I always like to cite the Ninth Amendment because it's a sort of a grab bag of all the rights that maybe weren't specified earlier. And it has been cited in major Supreme Court cases. And I think it should be cited here. Now, the 14th Amendment, again, is kind of a repeat of the due process clause. This is post-Civil War, granting rights to freed slaves, but it applies to everybody, whether you're a freed slave or not, or the ancestor. It applies to every person basically in the country, not just citizens. So that's important. And I also like to throw in the guarantee of Republican government. And what I mean by that is these decisions should be made by the legislature, not by the executive branch, because rule by decree is really the hallmark of dictatorship. And we've seen that throughout history, from ancient history, unfortunately, some very, very modern history, and in fact, some history in the last couple of weeks up in our neighbor to the north. So, and then finally, part of the complaint, and you'll see this in great detail, the demand for relief. You're asking for money damages, injunction, declaratory judgment, attorney's fees, and I put it all in the legalese that's been commonly used over and over again. And I draw, a lot of this language from prior lawsuits of mine, and very few of them have ever been challenged on like a motion to dismiss. Wow. So after you file and serve, and don't even wait to get an answer from the defendants, you want to make your motion for an injunction. Not an easy thing to do, but you got to do it, because that's why you're in court, not so you can get money damages 5 years from now, but you want an order that allows your kids to go to school next week without a mask. So an injunction is just a court order saying, stop this unfortunate practice of mandating masks.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ostrowski. Sure. Somehow when you turn to your left, it distorts the sound. So if you can move your notes kindly to face the microphone, it would
Sure.
people hear you.
Very good. I thank you for that. I apologize.
No problem.
So I'm going to get confused between left and right looking at myself, but just let me know if I have audio problems. So
That's much better.
Basically in the injunction, you're saying, look, this lawsuit's going to last 5 years, maybe, but I need relief now. I'm probably going to win the lawsuit, but if you wait, my kids are going to suffer harm that I can't compensate with money later on, emotional harm. Any constitutional rights violation is considered, quote, irreparable harm. So that's not a huge standard, but you want to get in and make that motion for an injunction. I mentioned somewhere in the outline, you've got to look at the court rules. There's court rules, there's federal rules of civil procedure. I think that's going to be in the links. There's local rules for each court. And let me just say parenthetically, our legal system is so unnecessarily complicated. And that's why it's very difficult for average people to get lawyers. Rich people can hire the lawyers and they know how to navigate the system. But unfortunately, it's a tricky system, but don't let it intimidate you. Just read these court rules. Each judge has their own rules. So there's 3 sets of rules. Read them all, underline them, and the local rules of the court will probably say what you need to file for an injunction is a witness list, an exhibit list. These are annoying things, but unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, this is how the system works, and you have to do it, or the court will reject your motion and you'll have to refile it. So that will all be in the rules. So going on, I mentioned court rules already. That's good. So I think I mentioned everything's e-filed now. Now, as far as I mentioned, if you can't get a lawyer, you might have to file pro se. If you can survive the various stages of the lawsuit, am I still on? I apologize.
Yes, you're there.
Yeah,
You're with us.
my camera froze. That's fine. So,
Quick jump in. Sorry. There are incredible questions in the chat. I just want to reassure everyone that they will have a chance to ask all their questions. But one of them is so central. I did want to present it to you just here.
Sure.
Someone asks, do you need to use a separate template to sue the governor, to sue the Board of Health, to sue the school board?
Oh, no. Everybody can be combined in one action. Thank goodness. And similar claims can be. So we joined 24 families, similar or almost identical claims. And all the defendants, as long as it's sort of the same type of issue, they're pretty liberal about that because the judges themselves don't want multiple lawsuits that they have to deal with.
Thanks so much.
So
carry on.
Now, after you serve, you've made your motion for an injunction. The other side's going to come in and they're going to file probably a motion to dismiss, which basically says, even if everything you say in the complaint is true, your cause of action is not valid. You're going to have to respond to that, and the judge will make that decision, or they could file a quote answer. That means that the litigation is going to go into discovery, and that's where it could get a little difficult for pro se people. But discovery means documents. Each side can demand documents. Discovery also means depositions. You can take the depositions of the defendants and other witnesses. They can take your depositions. That can get sort of complicated, but if you're going to be pro se, you're going to have to sort of bull your way through it and figure it out. And it's been done before. But as I said, if you can get by the motion to dismiss, or they don't file a motion to dismiss, it's going to be easier to get a lawyer, I think, if you bring them in later, because frankly, a lot of the work's been done. They can see that the case is going somewhere. And if it gets to the stage, after discovery, go through that. After discovery, both sides can make a motion for summary judgment. That means all the discovery is complete. There's really no issue of fact here. The law's on our side. Often the other side will say, yeah, there's no issue of fact, but the law's on our side. And then the judge makes the decision. If you get to that point where the judge, if you lose summary judgment or a motion to dismiss, you can go You can go to the Circuit Court of Appeal. There's 12 or 13 in the country. Mine is the Second Circuit in New York City that you see on TV all the time. So if the motion for summary judgment is denied, it goes to trial. And this is where, even if you've been pro se, you really want to say, let's see if I can get a lawyer, cut some sort of a deal. You get a contingency or whatever, or a flat fee, maybe a younger, hungrier lawyer, a public interest lawyer, maybe a big firm at that point might say, okay, we'll do this on a pro bono basis, meaning without charging. So that's the trial stage. It would take 5 years to teach you how to try a case. And unfortunately, that's just the reality that it's not easy to try a case, but pro se people have done it. And I'm going to try to go through the highlights here and make sure I've got everything. I won't cover the appeal. The appeal is kind of a whole different thing. And again, pro se people do appeals. You write a brief, you file a record, and you go there and argue in front of 3 judges down in Foley Square or in the state, wherever the Court of Appeals is in your state. So I just want to talk a little bit about strategy, and this will be in the notes, but don't put all your eggs in the basket of the court. I think it's important to go to court. It's important to make the judges issue a ruling on these matters, but make litigation part of a larger strategy of educating the public, activism, political activism, direct action like we've been seeing, up in Canada. Use all the strategies and tactics that are available, and don't just rely on one particular strategy. And all this, because all the strategies kind of reinforce each other. The filing of this lawsuit has gotten so much public attention, even from people who aren't litigants, and the people have read the complaint. People are getting educated. People are getting energized. School superintendents are already feeling the heat and may back down. So take a holistic approach and an integrated approach to strategy. And let's see what I'll say here. So there are other, just talk really briefly, and I should be done and we can take questions, but other than the mass lawsuit, there are other causes of action. So, for example, First Amendment retaliation. I just met a gentleman who spoke out against the mask mandate for his business, and they immediately called him and said, you better take your post down. So that, I said, that's a First Amendment retaliation claim. And that's really important. It's an important claim because it's pretty simple, it's easy to prove, and it's well recognized in the law. There's all sorts of challenges to the vaccine mandates, and I am not the expert on that. Several cases have reached the Supreme Court, but those cases should also allege constitutional violations, such as
problems
okay.
again. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. And the last possible cause of action I want to mention, I was involved in some of the ivermectin litigation with attorney Ralph Larigo, who happens to be a fellow Buffalo lawyer and an acquaintance of mine. He brought me in for a couple months. But the things I learned about how doctors and nurses have been intimidated in not following the best medical practices that they think are best for the health and welfare of their patients. The intimidation by disciplinary bodies and some of the certification boards, I think that should be the subject of possible litigation there. And in fact, some of that, I believe that some of that might constitute coercion in a criminal sense. And I know, Dr. Wolf, you've talked about grand juries involved, and I totally support that. I think grand juries should really wake up and start investigating these things. So those are some of the ideas that you can, in addition to the mask mandate, almost every aspect of the lockdown is either unconstitutional or even in some cases criminal. And So there's many opportunities if you do your research to try to figure out how to use this powerful weapon of a federal lawsuit to bring these defendants to justice. And in that discovery process, maybe find out what really happened in the lockdown. And some of these things, I think many of us agree, are actually criminal in nature and have cost innocent lives. So I just want to say in closing, pro se, and then we'll take questions. Pro se litigation is difficult, but it's not impossible. With very few exceptions, the legal profession has been AWOL in fighting against the lockdown. And this means that pro se litigation may be the only means of redress for many citizens. And I hope this introduction crash course and the links and documents provided will make this pro se litigation process a lot easier, and hopefully maybe even down the line be able to attract a public interest lawyer to help you finish off the case. So with that, we can take some questions, I guess.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Ostrowski. This is great. And thanks to everybody for all the great questions. So many really, obviously, a lot of these people have been working on this themselves. They have some great, very informed questions. And there's a few guys and girls in the chat who are obviously attorneys and have been helping out with answers along the way as well. So thank you guys for that. My question that I've seen several times is should parents and citizens be getting together and doing some kind of class action or whatever the term is, or should you just go and do it yourself one at a time?
Yeah, I have to confess, in 38 years, I've never done a class action. And I guess the reasons are it's complicated, it's expensive, and it's slow. And so what I do is I've done lawsuits with, say, 50 people. I've done lawsuits now with 24 people. It's like a de facto, sorry to use the jargon, but it's de facto class action because like I challenged corporate welfare in the state courts, Bordelot versus the state. If I had won that, even though I was representing only about 10 plaintiffs, that would have been over for the whole state. So many times you can accomplish the same result, which is with just a small number of representative plaintiffs, which is not to say that you shouldn't file your own, because, you know, we have lawsuits in 2 of the federal districts in New York. I don't see any harm in having lawsuits in the Southern District and the Eastern District. We'll get different judges, maybe different results. Some cases will go slow. They're trying to stall the case, just by way of example. I just looked at the docket. They're trying to stall the case in Albany on the grounds that, well, the state court down in Brooklyn is about to rule on this. So anything they can do to stall. Now, they don't have that stall available against my case in Buffalo because I didn't raise any state court issues. So the more the merrier, let a thousand flowers bloom. Let's not say who said that originally, but I've used that. So yes. Just
rushing through as many questions as I can. Sorry to jump in.
Yeah.
Matt asks, and you know, your answer applies to me and people I love as well. Lots of us. Any advice for private universities and employer mask mandates? Is it the same essential process as the mother of a college-age student? Can I take your template and, you know, go after the dean or the trustees?
You really can't. I did have an issue with my son's college over mandatory vaccination, and the argument that I won. I threatened to sue them in Buffalo, where they are not, because they went to Buffalo to recruit my son. We got jurisdiction over you. Sorry, this is what I do for a living. So what I argued there was breach of contract. So,
excellent.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a cause of action. I think you could probably argue breach of contract with the mask mandate, because it's like, you know, I didn't come here expecting to wear a diaper on my face, and they'll say, yeah, but there's a good reason. You'll say, no, there isn't a good reason. So breach of contract, you don't have this constitutional, you know, ammunition against a private firm or company generally, unless they're really closely aligned with the government. Now, we all know everybody's closely aligned, but proving that in federal court is tough.
Right.
So
you're
basically limited to do so, common law, contract, tort,
Very good.
cause of action.
Very good. And zipping ahead, may I, Craig, a couple of questions from the audience? Many moms and dads, it's heartbreaking. Their kids have asthma, speech language delay, deafness, and does the disabilities status or the learning challenge status of their child allow them any special support in their claim?
Yeah, it's not my area of expertise, but we did allege that children with disabilities are more gravely injured by these mandates, and I think a couple of the families have students in that category. So I think we can protect their rights within the confines of the lawsuit that we filed, but there may be special federal statutory laws that you can bring to play as well, and that's just not my area of expertise.
That's fine. Other people are asking, what about criminal actions? They're saying money is not enough. What's your view on that? And they're saying, pardon me, fill in. They're saying they're calling their sheriffs, they're calling their district attorneys. No one's taking their calls.
Yeah. So I wrote a book on all this called A Crime Against Humanity. So yes, I do believe that there are real crimes. And again, just to reiterate the example, there's a statute in New York called coercion. So if your doctor has been threatened by a governmental disciplinary board for speaking out or prescribing, and I think that some of them have, that could actually be a violation of the New York Penal Code. Every state has their own penal code, and many of these penal codes basically mirror each other. And you're right, the political officials, the police agencies, which are political at the end of the day, let's face it, the district attorneys in New York are elected. Even when they're appointed, they're all appointed by elected officials. That's why I think it's important, and Dr. Wolf has shown great acumen in saying, let's get the grand juries involved. The grand jury was supposed to be the agency that represented the people when the political branches of government refused to investigate. So I'm involved with some people in this area who are grand jury activists, and we want to educate. Grand jurors can investigate things like this, and if the DA won't, we need to get grand jurors to do that. Not easy to do, but that's why the grand jury's there.
Just a follow-up question, if I may. Just practically, I mean, I'll just say this: my stepson, he's in another state, but they're wearing masks, and we got sent a notice that they were going to double mask children who were not wearing their masks correctly and distancing. So can people who may not be able to kind of go the grand jury route, can they simply file a police report if for no other reason than to have it on the record that this is child abuse, or call Child Protective Services? Or is there blowback or risk to that?
Well, there's always retaliation. I've written about that, but you just have to make a choice that I'm going to make this complaint. Yes, you can always go to a police agency and say, look, I want you to investigate whether this set of facts constitute a crime, and it's their job to investigate that.
Good.
So
thank you.
I would say yes. Now, depending on the jurisdiction, sometimes you can go right to a municipal judge and say, Judge, the crime's being committed, issue a summons. So what I like to do law enforcement shopping, like in my district, you've got the police, you got the sheriff, you got the DA, you got the state police. Sometimes you have the FBI. Shop around, and maybe you'll strike oil with one of those agencies.
Thank you.
Is it not true that part of the strategy is to, if in one state, one county, one city, one district, if 100 parents are all suing, that
Yep.
volume of suits creates a motivation for the officials involved, right? That we want
Yes.
a lot of suits.
Of course, I can't say you should do that to clog the courts, but if you have the right to do it, and many people do it, it is imposing a cost on these municipalities. And at some point, they're going to have to pay so much money for attorney's fees that it will be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
So volume is important. Jumping in with a question from Levi, a question about plaintiffs. If we live in a state where the mask mandates were more of a county or school district issue, would it be smart to not list the governor and other state officials as plaintiffs? What's your response to that strategy?
Yeah, you'd only want to sue, let's say in New York, we sued the county executive and the governor, but if there was only a county mandate, we wouldn't have sued the governor, we would have let her be and just sued. So you only sue the people who are violating the rights of your family member.
Fantastic, thank you. Craig, did you want to go through?
Well, there's Mr. Ostrowski, there's a lot of people asking about the concept of the surety bond and whether that's a viable strategy here.
I've heard about this. It's not anything that I've gotten involved with. Normally when I sue, so I'm only talking about New York, but every state is quite similar. So in New York, when I sue a state or local official, they are indemnified by the public officers law. So I don't have to worry about them paying a judgment. Some agents, some like school districts usually have an insurance policy, and you get the insurance company would pay. The city of Buffalo and the county of Erie are self-insured, but I never really have to worry about bonds and things of that nature. I know that there's been talk about this. I can't say that it's valid or not valid. I know the only officer I know of who has a bond in New York State is the sheriff. I've sued the sheriff twice. Never got into the bonding situation. I walked away with settlements on both occasions without worrying about that. So anything you read on the web, I'm not saying it's not valid. Check it out yourself. And what I always like to say is, if something has succeeded, show me a newspaper, show me a court decision, prove to me that it succeeded, and then maybe it's worth checking out. I'm not saying it's not. I just don't know, and it's not anything I have expertise in.
It's really good advice. Following up on that, Donna asks, if you lose a lawsuit, can the district sue you? I know this is a concern for a lot of people. Will there be countersuits? Or can you be charged with harassment or some other retaliation?
The American rule is everybody pays their own attorney's fees. If you're pro se and you file a lawsuit, and the odds of you getting like sanctioned and made to pay some fine, civil fine, not a criminal fine, or the other person's attorney's fees are close to zero. So I wouldn't worry about it. If you repeatedly file a frivolous case that's been rejected 6-7 times, they're going to crack down, but you're not going to do that. So don't worry about it.
Excellent. May I keep going with one more, Craig?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Thank you. Hope asks, and this is very much in the news because I found out tonight that New York State, where I am sitting, has passed a Board of Health regulation to allow people to be quarantined against their will. Her question is, how can we apply these strategies to address the quarantine and isolation centers and the WAC code in Washington State? Or is that a completely different issue? Or can people use this premise of suing members of the Board of Health in Washington State, in New York State, for deprivation of due process, for coercion, for other things they're doing wrong with these coercive?
I would say that's definitely worth challenging. You might have a standing problem. In other words, if they haven't actually, well, let's say the opposite. Let's say they do it to you. You definitely should sue. If you're just challenging the statute, you might have a standing problem. In other words, standing is this weird doctrine that basically shuts people out of going to court, but it's unfortunately a reality. Other than the standing issue, which you have to show you're sort of affected by this more than the average person is, yes, I think it's outrageous. This is not the type of disease that calls for that sort of drastic action, when basically the most of the world is ending the lockdown, except for a few hardcore states and municipalities.
Right. Craig, do you want to go through more questions on your list?
Yeah, so there's a lot of people that are not in New York and are asking, where should they they turn first to look for, resources in terms of the state's, court resources and things like that? And also, how should they go about finding an attorney in that state?
Good question. This is a problem in the profession about, finding good lawyers. But most bar associations have a referral service. You can ask around. You can call, maybe sometimes there's sort of, you could call legal aid for ideas. They might not have a lawyer, but they might know, which, in every community, there's usually a couple of young, hungry lawyers who are willing to sue over matters of public interest without charging an arm and a leg up front. It's going to take some legwork, but you can usually find them. If not, you can go pro se and hope to survive the initial battles, and then maybe draw some attention to your case through the media, and maybe you can pick up a lawyer. But start with the local bar association. Every single one of them has referral service. I did contact a local bar in Buffalo. A friend of mine is the president, and said, look, the lawyers have to step up and provide lawyers at least a way for people to contact a lawyer to get a quick opinion. So call the bar association first.
Excellent. Alyssa was denied getting prescriptions from CVS for not wearing a mask. She wants to sue Gavin Newsom, the state health director, and her local health director. That's bad, to be denied prescriptions. Would you recommend using this template or this approach for a situation like that? Discrimination.
Sure. Yeah. If they are continuing the mask mandate, it's going to be tough to get money damages in these cases for reasons that are, somewhat technical. But if the mask mandate is still ongoing, I see no reason, since it has no scientific basis. We all know it doesn't work. We've all seen the charts and the comparisons and the studies. Yes, I think this template could be used for that purpose. Excellent.
Craig, over to you.
Well, there's just so many questions. It's kind of overwhelming. If the like in the pharmacy case, it sounds as if what a lot of people are asking about, and what you're saying, is that it's all about, sort of choosing who to sue, right? And in the pharmacy case, isn't it the pharmacy itself that's violating the rights of the person trying to get a prescription?
Yeah, the problem is, though, now you're outside the realm of the Constitution, because
they're not public officials.
In order to, if you look at the 14th Amendment, the post-Civil War, it's about state officials. So you have to have, quote, state action in 99% of the cases, and that's going to be a problem. Otherwise, CBS, it would be breach of contract. They're going to say, I was just complying with the state law. So it's really an action against the state, not CBS.
Right. Can I jump in with Lisa Wisniewski, who says, so grateful to you all for doing this. And I just want to say, Mr. Ostrowski, we're so grateful to you. She says, the problem I have is that my son is in a Catholic school, and their rules are worse than our Philadelphia Super Blue City Public School District rules. My son is in first grade, removed all mask breaks, masks on at all times during gym and playing sports, silent lunch every day since day one, because they were told by the teachers, talking to friends spreads germs. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm hearing stories of this kind of unbelievable abuse across the country. What about parochial schools, Catholic schools?
Well, you're very, very disappointed with my own Catholic Church's sad performance during the lockdown. I'm really sad to hear that. But again, it's a private entity. You could sue them for breach of contract. They probably wouldn't be too happy about that. And actually, I don't think that's an unreasonable legal theory. But your better option would be, as many people are doing, just pull your kids out and homeschool them until this madness ends. But that's easy for me to say and hard for you to do.
Yeah.
But you can't sue under the Constitution.
To your point earlier, would a state university fall under the 14th Amendment?
Absolutely. State action. Absolutely.
Very good information. So Kristen says the American Board of Internal Medicine wrote threatening letters to all physicians, threatening to revoke their licenses if they say anything negative about the vaccine. Sounds like criminality to me. I have a letter. So this is not the same issue. It's a related issue. Is there any action that people can take against professional organizations? I would say that in this case, the pediatricians organizations are very germane to what we're talking about.
Yeah, I've seen this happen. I know of it happening. I've looked at the statutes. Seems to me like coercion or whatever the analog statute is in your state. Yes, I think it's potentially criminal. It's certainly absolutely outrageous and a violation of scientific inquiry. It's a violation of good medical practices to have people threatening people instead of making good arguments and providing data. It's just horrible. So I think that should be investigated for possible civil liability and criminal liability because it's just outrageous. Mm-hmm. It's killing people, frankly, to bully doctors into not giving the treatment they want to give. It's probably killed many people.
So on that note, Michael asks, can we use this template in California? And what I'm hearing from you is that basically the template can be tweaked for any state. Is that correct?
Yes.
You can fill
yes.
in the blanks, basically.
Yes, I should have made that clear. Yes, this is federal. So any of the states and frankly, probably even U.S. territories, but certainly every single state, I left blanks to fill it in. So anywhere in the United States, this type of lawsuit can be brought. You just have to fill in the appropriate local facts and circumstances.
Fantastic. And Cindy Seltzer asks, can you fight mask mandate and vaccination mandate in the same suit? Great question.
Yes, I see no reason why you can't. It's just going to be a longer, more complicated complaint, but absolutely you can.
Great. Craig, over to you. Do you have other pressing questions that you see?
We're talking about elected officials, state officials, city officials, county officials, et cetera. That would include the school administrators as well as the elected representatives to the school board, right?
Yes. In my case, I sued the superintendents. I try to avoid suing school board members because of this nasty doctrine called legislative immunity. And there's a lot of gray area there, but the superintendent's not a legislator. So I tend to sue the executive branch, the police, the superintendent, people who are executing things. Almost impossible to sue judges. That's a story for a different day. And the legislature has this very broad immunity, not absolute, but it's pretty close to absolute. So you want to be suing people who are in charge of executing policy, enforcing policy. That way you stay away from some of these immunity issues that you get with judges and legislators.
Very good advice. If I can jump in, Steve Kramer in capitals, and my heart goes out to you, says, James, is there a theory where a grandparent can sue because the parents are concerned about retaliation? Again, a great question.
I wish I knew the answer to that, but I think that the courts are pretty lenient in allowing somebody to stand in for a child if the parent is unavailable for whatever reason. So I would take a stab at it. And the only thing that can happen is that the defendants say you don't have standing and you argue it in front of the judge.
Fantastic. Whoa, 7 security guards threatened Kevin at the Hilton BOE last night over the mask, LOL. But, whoa. And then this is related. Amelia asks, Amelia Barton, what if a private university takes federal funding? And I think we kind of answered that earlier. It does expose them under the 14th Amendment. Is that correct?
I don't think taking funding necessarily does. I haven't actually researched that, but I would say probably not. But if there's a closer relationship where the college is working very closely with enforcing federal policies, maybe, but it's tough. It's going to be a tough obstacle to add on top of what's an already, not an easy battle to begin with.
Gotcha. And Jim asks, and I know we need to wrap up, can we sue school board members personally? And I believe your lawsuit does do that. Is that correct?
Well, again, I avoided suing the school board members because of this legislative immunity. It's better to sue the superintendent.
Gotcha. But that's personal, right? So what if, God willing, someone sues the superintendent and wins? There are monetary damages people can get, as well as the satisfaction of stopping this child abuse, right?
Yes.
I mean, what's the outcome if you're successful?
Yes. And generally speaking, they'll be indemnified by the government agency. But if you ask for punitive damages, sometimes those will not be indemnified, and the person will have to fess up out of their own pocket. Now, it's very difficult. Judges don't like punitive damages, in my experience. So it's tough to get, but not impossible. If they've done something just absolutely outrageous, you might be able to get punitive damages.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's all the time we've got. Craig, do you want to wrap it up and go to the to-dos?
Yeah. So I've had this slide up for a few minutes, and I've been putting the links directly into the chat so everybody could access that. You guys will all get an email in about 24 hours that will have the recording of this webinar and all of these links as well. So don't worry if you didn't get everything. It'll also have the sample complaint and all of that stuff as well. One thing that I wanted to mention, Daily Cloud is just releasing this new platform called Campaigns. And the whole idea is it's a way for readers, viewers, members of Daily Cloud to publish information on Daily Cloud and share it with others, right? Well, throughout this discussion, what really keeps coming out is there needs to be some sort of statewide coordination of information. So if any of you guys are interested in kind of helping disseminate information about how to go about doing the things that Mr. Ostrowski is talking about in your state, other than New York, reach out to me and I'd be happy to help work with you to help you set up a campaign. So as you're learning about the process and finding attorneys and whatever else, we can help share that with other people in your state.
And may I add that on that campaigns function, we can also, a lot of people are saying, let's get together, let's meet, we can help facilitate people setting a time to meet in their state, connecting with each other. And go ahead, did you want to go through the to-dos, or should we turn it over to what Mr. Ostrowski would like to highlight for his?
Yeah, no, go ahead, Mr. Ostrowski.
Yeah, so please tell us what we can do to support you, Mr. Ostrowski.
Yeah, I see the links you posted. They're fabulous. I'm going to get you the outline that I worked off of because we weren't able to get into all the details. There's a lot of good information there, hopefully laid out in fairly logical order. And I really appreciate you inviting me. This is fantastic. And again, we need to educate the public. The legal system has been so sort of mysterious and secretive, and that doesn't work that works for the benefit of the legal special interest, but not for our benefit. So it's great to sort of open this up and shine a light on how this extremely complicated system works so people can actually navigate it. And just want to thank you for inviting me. And the one thing I'm working on now, if anybody in New York has some really unfortunately bad stories, I can maybe put that into an affidavit and file it in our case to try to convince the judge in Buffalo to give us an injunction. So that's what I'm working on in the next few days, and I'm pretty easy to find. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and
if they go to libertymovement.org, they can get in touch with you there.
Yeah, that's actually my political site. It's not my legal site, but all my contact info is on there. And then there's some good ideas for direct citizen action, including the grand jury issue that we spoke about. And I know Dr. Wolf has previously expressed an interest in that.
Well, Mr. Ostrowski, everybody who needs a lawyer in New York State and who wants to join Mr. Ostrowski's affidavit or speak to him about other issues, please reach out to him. He is the best. And I just want to say, you know, everyone, you've just heard sort of hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of fantastic legal advice. And this wonderful hero of liberty and your rights has just come on out of the goodness of his heart. So please, you know, support all of us you can donate to Daily Clout. You can become members of Daily Clout. We need your help to keep educational webinars like this that empower you going. So you will see the donate button in the chat. And again, you know, express your appreciation to Mr. Ostrowski. Let him know how much you appreciated this. And the best thing you can do of all for your children's sake is take his advice, take his template, and go sue the heck out of these people who are tormenting your children. This is Naomi Wolf, Daily Clout. Heartfelt thanks to Mr. Ostrowski, heartfelt thanks to Craig Klein, and especially heartfelt thanks to all of you for taking action on behalf of your children and the rule of law.
Thanks everybody. Thanks, Mr. Ostrowski.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.